How come, sir, President Idi Amin is the most prominently remembered in Uganda?
He was patriotic.
And is the most quoted apparently worldwide.
He was patriotic, as far as Uganda is concerned. He is the one who would say Uganda first, and not me first. Can you imagine Idi Amin returning today, walking from Grand Imperial Hotel down Nile Avenue and being told that Grand Imperial Hotel now belongs to an Indian, and that Speak Hotel belongs to an Indian, and that Sheraton now belongs to Americans, and walking down further and being told that the former Nile mansions now belongs to an Indian, and that the former teacher training college at Shimon now belongs to an Indian. He would go mad. Not only that, much worse, to be told that the former doctor's village, where the doctors used to stay near Mulago Hospital, now belongs to an Indian, and that the doctors were groping around to find where to live and be able to come amidst this poverty to attend to their duties in the hospital.
Were you in Uganda at the time Idi Amin kicked out?
For 3 years, I was here.
Give us experience.
I returned in 1972 here.
Did you get something? Because I am told they were giving blacks, throwing out Indians and giving up. I don't know what you got, I don't know.
I got nothing.
What happened?
But I refused. The first president, of course, was a governor. He was succeeded by the next president, President Mutesa. President Mutesa was forcibly thrown out by President Obote. President Obote was forcefully thrown out by President Idi Amin. President Idi Amin was forcefully thrown out by combined force of Ugandan refugees and Tanzanians, and was succeeded by President Lule. President Lule was forced off the chair by a vote of the small parliament, then acting at the parliament of Uganda, and he was replaced by President Binayisa. President Binayisa, after only 11 months, was thrown out by the military commission, whose job, by the way, when we were setting up the military commission in Moshi, was only to see to the end how the war against Idi Amin, to get rid of Idi Amin, was brought to an end. But now it had assumed another role, whereby it threw out President Binayisa. And by the way, I have reasons for that, because I was present, and I was not only just present, but I was inside. I knew exactly what caused Binayisa to be thrown out of office. The main cause of bone of contention, as Bazungu might say, is the chair called the presidency. Obote attacked Mutesa, the first president, and drove him out of the chair. And Obote assumed the chairmanship as president. Amin surprised Obote, who was visiting out of Uganda, and displaced him and took over the chair. It took a whole war for us to throw Amin off that chair. And eventually, Obote regained it. When he regained it, it took a 5 years war led by President Museveni to drive Museveni out of that chair. Of course, it was Tito Okello who first drove Obote. But then 6 months later, Museveni drove Otito off the chair. Now, who does not realize that is that chair which is the bone of contention?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Nze Haji Kabogoza, omusomi w'edduwa, ntereza ensonga z'amaka, ebyenfuna n'endwadde ezitategeerekeka. Haji Kabogoza, omusomi w'edduwa, nsiŋŋaanibwa ekitigoma ku lw'ejjinja. Bw'obanga otuuse ekitigoma mu ttawuni ku siteegi, osobola okuba ku nnamba z'essimu ezo z'olaba zitambula. Gwe wenna ali ewala oyinza okuyita ku mukutu gwaffe ogwa WhatsApp ku layini eyo eya MTN obudde bwonna mbeerako.
Who determined who drew the map for Uganda and Uganda? Yes.
Okay, let us now. The map for Uganda was drawn by the Europeans in Germany. In the sitting room of the King of Germany when the Europeans were sharing the African continent. And they must have bargained. The British must have said, Lake Victoria, they named it Lake Victoria. Don't be deceived. It was already here, and the Africans knew what it was, and they used to call it Narubali. So the Bazungu, in the effort to glorify their own kingdoms, renamed it Lake Victoria, and renamed all the others as well, except Bunoni. I think it remains with this name, and Mburo. So anyhow, so Buganda Kingdom already was there. But remember that while they were drawing that map of Uganda, the Buganda Kingdom extended across Lake Victoria. The whole of Lake Victoria was in Buganda. A portion of the northern Tanzania was part of Buganda. If you were to have a chance to look at a book written by Sir Apollo Kagwa in 1902, when he went to attend the coronation of King George, I think the fourth, the father of the late Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth II. Kagwa narrates that when they sailed from Entebbe, they were received by the Kabaka's chiefs, the Gombolola chiefs at Kisumu. And they lived at the headquarters, the Gombolola and the Saza chiefs' headquarters over the Buganda Kingdom, all the way until they entered Kenya at Naivasha. So that's how far Buganda was. But when the British were drawing the agreements, the boundaries, they gave themselves the authority to take off a part and give it to Kenya. That is why I am saying Africans have been arguing here about the Europeans drawing wrong boundaries for them, boundaries that subdivided countries, kingdoms. Look at the Bakongo Kingdom. Part of it is in Congo, part of it is in Congo-Brazzaville, part of it is in Angola. The Europeans just divided it without care as to where they are.
So the lost counties of Maira Kenya.
Now the lost counties. So now, the Buganda Kingdom was left with 18,000 square miles. After taking off that part, which the Bazungu gave to Kenya and to Tanzania. Now, when Buganda was left by 18,000 square miles, you have to remember that before the Bazungu came, the whole of Buganda, there was one landlord, the Kabaka. And I believe in the other kingdoms also, the Kabaka there, or Mugabe, or the Omukama, must have been the landlord. Okay? So now, here now, the Kabaka is left with 18,000 square miles. I do not know who brought the idea that the prominent chiefs of Buganda should be each be given 8 square miles, and about 1,000 of them were given 8,000 square miles. And 9,000 square miles was left for the future generations. Those are the ones which are now a controversy. And this is not a controversy starting from a long time ago, a controversy starting from the time when Obote was president. And he introduced a dragon called public land. Now, public land was not known before this independence. There was something even more ridiculous, crown land. And if you asked, which crown? The British crown. Now, how could the British crown have land in the center of Africa? You can see what the Europeans were doing to us. In any case, the 9,000 square miles, remember, we had 3 categories. The land given to the chiefs and those prominent people, the land given to the Kabaka, the land given to the mother of Kabaka, and the land given to the churches and missionaries, and the land given to some of the princes and princesses. Put together, left 9,000 square miles, undivided, but not in one place. And they said, this belongs to those who come in the future generations. Now, that is what is beginning a big controversy at the moment. Instead of taking a simple idea of saying the land in Acholi belongs to the Acholi people, the land in Toro belongs to the Toro people, the land in Bunyoro belongs to the Banyoro people. That's where they were born, that's where they have been. And saying the land in Buganda belongs to Buganda. By the way, the Buganda is such a great mixture. And nowadays, of course, they are no longer only the Buganda. Eh? They are everybody, you know. But still in Buganda.
So, sir, you are
I
student.
hope I have explained a little bit.
Student of history, because we are trying to flash back into independence. Why, therefore, given that background, 60 years later today, this issue of land has remained controversial in the country?
Because the 9,000 square miles was forcibly taken over by the Uganda government. And instead of being left to the people of Buganda, regardless of whether they are Baganda or Bacholi, but those in Buganda.
What is your view? Because this subject, 60 years later, I think is enough time now. It should have been not only Buganda, but throughout Uganda, the question of land should have been sorted out by now.
I have been a student of political science in America for years. I told you, but that was in the Uganda version, that the Constitution of USA has 9 articles. Throughout the whole Constitution of USA, there are the word land appears only 3 times. And on none of those 3 times is it related to the ownership of land. It's related to things like armed forces on the land, people found on the land. But as far as the land ownership is concerned, it's not touched at all. Is anyone going to convince me that land in the United States of America does not have anyone who owns it? That's why I'm saying that the Constitution of Uganda has not been properly studied and drawn. People have not sat sufficiently and asked themselves, who are we? What are we? How best can we govern ourselves? And the best way is to design a constitution which fits the nature of the country. I have normally always quoted the American great man who was president when they were making the American Constitution. He used to say, a constitution is like a garment. It must be tailored to fit the contours of the wearer. So, now the wearer is called Uganda. Now if you know him, you design a constitution that will fit him and make him feel comfortable.
Yes, that's where I was going to come next. You are quoted to be very, very controversial regarding the Constitution of Uganda. So today, 2022, what are the missing links in the Ugandan Constitution?
The Ugandan Constitution was not designed to create harmony among the different communities. Uganda is made of different communities. The Batoro, the Bamba, the Bachiga, the Banyankore. The main primary purpose of a constitution of Uganda should be how these communities would work in harmony. The constitution, all the 4 constitutions so far have failed to achieve that. That is why I'm saying, and the main cause of bone of contention, as Bazungu might say, is the chair called the presidency. Obote attacked Mutesa, the first president, and drove him out of the chair. And Obote assumed the chairmanship as president. Amin surprised Obote, who was visiting out of Uganda, and displaced him and took over the chair. It took a whole war for us to throw Amin off that chair. And eventually, Obote regained it. When he regained it, it took a 5 years war led by President Museveni to drive Museveni out of that chair. Of course, it was Tito Okello who first drove Obote But then 6 months later, Museveni drove Otito off the chair. Now, who does not realize that is that chair, which is the bone of contention? And it's my submission that until we do away with that chair, in other words, we abolish the idea of the office of the president, until we abolish the presidency.
So, Mr. Israel Mayengo, yes,
wait,
supposing you allow, yes, supposing you are called to Parliament to give a presentation about the Uganda Constitution, and you have 10 minutes to say that, which areas would you tackle in?
Number one, I would say that the Constitution must be redesigned to fit the nature of the country, to prevent any community from dominating the others in Uganda. That would be the primary purpose of the Constitution. And once that is done, everything else, federalism, whatnot, political parties, will follow next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Israel Mayengo. Another point I'd like to talk to us as an elder about the history of Uganda's governance. Since 1962 to date, who has been coming in and going out, and in what form? I know the most prominent person is Idi Amin, Dr. Paul Obote, and now His Excellency Yoweri Museveni. These are the only three who are most prominent. But give me the history, 62 to today, 2022.
The first president, of course, was a governor. He was succeeded by the next president, President Mutesa. President Mutesa was forcibly thrown out by President Obote. President Obote was forcefully thrown out by President Idi Amin. President Idi Amin was forcefully thrown out by combined force of Ugandan refugees and Tanzanians, and was succeeded by President Lule. President Lule was forced off the chair by a vote of the small parliament, then acting as the Parliament of Uganda, and he was replaced by President Binaisa. President Binaisa, after only 11 months, was thrown out by the military commission, whose job, by the way, when we were setting up the military commission in Moshi, was only to see to the end how the war against Idi Amin, to get rid of Idi Amin, was brought to an end. But now it had assumed another role, whereby it threw out President Binaisa. And by the way, I have reasons for that, because I was present, and I was not only just present, but I was inside. I knew exactly what caused Binaisa to be thrown out of office. He was replaced by a presidential commission of 3 judges. Those are the ones who brought Uganda's election, who organized Uganda's elections of December 1980. And when the elections came to an end, there was a controversy as to whether the Uganda People's Congress had won more seats in parliament or not. According to Mwanga, who was a UPC diehard and the Secretary General, UPC had won the majority of seats in parliament, and therefore UPC's leader became the president. Thus, Obote became the president a second time. The war against Obote started in about January or February 1981, led by President Museveni. It lasted up to when Obote himself disagreed with his comrade Tito Okello. And Tito Okello left Kampala with a force of all the Bacholi who were in the army and went to Gulu. They recruited a few others and returned a few weeks later. Obote was told that they were coming by the thousands to invade him. Obote took off. And Okello declared himself the president. Now, Okello wanted to have a discussion, a negotiation with the force which was fighting Obote at that time. That thing was called the Nairobi Peace Talks, in which an agreement was drawn, signed, agreed upon, and ignored. Only 6 months later, the force which was fighting the Bush War took over, and Tito Okello escaped. He ran off. President Museveni became the president, was sworn in amid a huge form of jubilation. Why? Not so much because he was loved most, but so much because Obote was hated most. So, President Museveni took over from 1986 to now.
So that's the genesis.
Now,
yes.
the matter is, all these wars that have been talking about were not wars against Uganda. They were wars against an individual.
Individuals.
The 1970 war, 79, when Obote, Amin ran out of here, the war was over. When Obote ran out of here, the war was over. So, don't you see that there's something sinister in the single person being president of this country? Now,
So how come, sir, President Idi Amin is the most prominently remembered in Uganda?
He was patriotic.
And is the most quoted apparently worldwide.
He was patriotic, as far as Uganda is concerned. He is the one who would say Uganda first, and not me first. Can you imagine Idi Amin returning today, walking from Grand Imperial Hotel down Nile Avenue and being told that Grand Imperial Hotel now belongs to an Indian, and that Speak Hotel belongs to an Indian, and that Sheraton now belongs to Americans, and walking down further and being told that the former Nile mansions now belongs to an Indian, and that the former teacher training college at Shimon now belongs to an Indian. He would go mad. Not only that, much worse, to be told that the former doctor's village, where the doctors used to stay near Mulago Hospital, now belongs to an Indian, and that the doctors were groping around to find where to live and be able to come amidst this poverty to attend to their duties in the hospital.
Were you in Uganda at the time Idi Amin kicked out to
For 3 years,
Indians?
I was here.
Give us experience.
I returned in 1972 here.
Did you get something? Because I am told they were giving blacks, throwing out Indians and giving up. I don't know what you got, I don't know.
I got nothing.
What happened?
But I refused, as a matter of fact. But then, roundabout, I became completely wealthy. How? Because all the manufacturers outside Uganda trusted Indians only as their agents. So when Ugandans here went to line up to take the Indian shops, Ugandan shops, I didn't go to line up. I bought a ticket around the world. I went to the manufacturers overseas, and by the time I came back, I had signed 16 agreements to represent those manufacturers outside. And I made money out of that without taking anything that Indian had. I represented a thing like Colgate for some time here and in Rwanda. So everybody who brushes teeth with Colgate paid me something.
So yes, sir. Another thing.
I was here from 1962, 72 up to 1976. When Idi Amin threw away the Indians around 1973 at the beginning, around there, okay? But then I was present as he slided from the scale, from the stage of being the most favorite to being the most brutal and therefore hated. He was welcomed with extraordinary jubilation in 1971 because Obote had become a horror to the country, according to most of the country. You see, this Uganda is governed by relativity. A man who is in Gulu now might say this is the worst we have ever had. One who is in Busenyi could say this is the best we have ever had. One who is in Buganda says it's difficult to tell, you know. When Obote threw away Idi Amin, the Northerners must have said excellent. The people in Buganda said horrible. This is relativity I'm talking about. So, even today, you would find that after the ravages of the Kone War in the north, they might in the north say, this is a horror. In Buganda we are saying, we got rid of Obote, In the West, they say the best time the West has ever had. So relativity governs this country.
So among those relativity positions, yes, another highly quoted move was the no relay, no work. How much can you share with us? No relay, no work. I don't know, where were you?
Same reason, I was present.
What happened?
Relay was the next president after Idi Amin. And people were saying, finally, we have returned to some kind of normalcy and peace and some kind of stability. I'm telling you, at that time, everything Relay said became a law, even when he didn't know about it. I'll give you one example which was excellent and ridiculous. Relay appointed me to be in charge of the areas where Amin had been driven as the war proceeded from Mutukula to Mundatete, and we called it Masaka district. After Amin had left, a schoolmate of mine from another chap from King College, from Bodo, was in charge of Mubende. And we were schoolmates. We used to meet and laugh between the two of us. So one day we played a gimmick. We said, you go to Mubende, announce over the radio that people, butchers in Kampala, have reduced the meat price to a half. And I'll go to Masaka and I'll announce the same thing. I went and announced that over the radio, and my friend Waswa announced the same thing in Mwende, and from there the whole world started reducing prices and saying now barely, now barely. It was as stupid as that, as ridiculous as that, and we knew nothing about it. People just believed him, you know. Now things were getting better. Seba Gedeka was the Minister of Finance. He came to the stage of saying, at this rate, within 6 months, the Kenya shilling will be equal to Uganda shilling. 68 days later, to the surprise of everybody, they were thrown out of office, out of the presidency. And the reasons were personal, not national at all. They are so long I can't really go through them now. But that's what I'm telling you. The main reason was that Relay called Mwanga a thief, and Mwanga swore to throw Relay out of office, and he succeeded by just talking to 16 of us who were in the Consultative Council, then known as the President, as the Parliament, and they voted Relay out. 13 of us refused, 16 agreed that it should be, we should have no confidence in Relay. And when that was known, it was, by the way, it was not supposed to be announced, because after that vote had been taken and Binaisa replaced, I had been sent by my friends, the 16 who said no, from upstairs in the State House, to go downstairs and find out what the 16 were doing. And the chairman, Lugumai, at that time, told me, just come and join us. You see, they had already elected a president. There are 16 of them. President Binaisa was already seated there. So I went upstairs and I told my friends, we can't defeat them now. We better join them. And they agreed with me and allowed me to go downstairs and negotiate the terms of how we would join together. Among the terms that I negotiated, the main one was that it was not to be announced that we had forced Relay out of office. We were to tell a lie that Relay personally had agreed and decided to give up the presidency because his main duty was to throw Idi Amin out of here. He had accomplished it. Now he was leaving us. And at that time, remember, we are youths. We were just in our early 40s, myself and all the others, including President Museveni, that we are now going to take over from there. Unfortunately, people from your exactly company, UBC, are the ones who Radio Uganda are the ones who let us down. When we were in the sitting room, a young fellow from Radio Uganda said, can I talk with the president for a while? We said yes, and they went to a committee room somewhere on the side, and they carried out an interview. Relay returned. Mwanga asked Lugumai, Mr. Chairman, do you know what the President Relay has told the radio people? And Lugmayo said, no, hey, young man. The young man was walking out with a small box. Bring it back. Play it back. The fellow from Radio Uganda put that box on a coffee table, and we all listened. And here comes out the small voice, I have been forced out of office, and I have not left on my own. The young fellows closed the box. Lugmayo turned to me and said, Mayengo, is that what we negotiated? I said, no, it's not. Meanwhile, these young chaps closed the box and walked out. The time was about 5 p.m. By half an hour later, it was on Radio Uganda, the small voice saying that he had been thrown out. People became wild in Kampala and they started no one, which went through the night.
Why are you calling it a box?
It was a recorder.
Did you see it yourself?
Oh, yes, of course.
In what form was it?
It was a small box with a tape recorder inside.
All right.
Inside, so
Okay, that's a story for another day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Nze Haji Kaboggoza omusomi w'edduwa ntereeza ensonga z'amaka ebyenfuna n'endwadde ezitategeerekeka. Haji Kaboggoza omusomi w'edduwa nsiŋŋaanibwa ekitigoma ku lw'ejjinja. Bw'obanga otuuse ekitigoma mu ttawuni ku siteegi osobola okuba ku nnamba z'essimu ezo z'olaba zitambula. Gwe wenna ali ewala oyinza okuyita ku mukutu gwaffe ogwa WhatsApp ku layini eyo eya MTN obudde bwonna mbeerako.
So another controversy, sir, as we celebrate independence now, is the issue of the 1980 polls. Also remains very controversial in Uganda's history. How much do you remember of that 1980 general elections and what happened?
In 1980, in June, there was a decision to be made by Parliament. At that time, the expanded National Consultative Council, with a few added. Remember, the original ones were the Moshi Conference people, 30 of us. But now we had added on new ones with Adi Salish into Musoke, those were Chivejinja, ones who were here. Okay? So, the question was, in June, we are going to have elections in December. Are those elections to be held in political parties or not? The day was Monday. And we said on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we shall meet at Parliament and decide. We got there, the young group, at 2 o'clock, only to be told by people at Parliament that our colleagues, the Semogereres, the Yakyasinze, and so many others, had met at 10 o'clock and decided that elections would be in political parties. We became incensed and absolutely mad, and we said we cannot deal with the people who are so dishonest, so disrespectful of others. We're going to form a party of our own. There was no fence between Parliament and City Council at that time. So we walked into the City Council, in the hall where we meet every now and then, and we sat down and decided to form a party of our own. We formed the Uganda Patriotic Movement, UPM, and elected President Museveni to be the president of it, and had to have 3 vice presidents. Since Museveni was coming from the west, there would be no vice president from the west. We wanted a vice president from Buganda, one from east and one from the north. I was the vice president from Buganda. And we set off to canvass for votes, to campaign across the country.
You also remember
within the justice.
Exactly,
Bidandisali was the Secretary General. And Chimda Chivejinja, the treasurer. So the head of the UPM was President Museveni as the president. I was one of the 3 vice presidents. Chimda Chivejinja was the treasurer, and Bidandisali was the Secretary General. So we now had 6 months to go all over the country to convince people to vote and elect UPM. Remember, there was no president running for the presidency. The party which would have the majority of seats in Parliament, its leader would become the president. So we went out. I was to stand in Nisesa Islands, Masaka West, Masaka South. I was held at roadblock on the nomination day in Katonga for hours by the army. So by the time I reached the nomination point, it was too late. I was time bad. So I was not campaigning for any seat. I only supported my colleagues. and the elections took place. When the elections took place, there were some ridiculous things that one should never forget. I'll give you one example. One member of UPC lost his seat. He lost his he lost the election. He was not elected in his area, and the DP man was elected. And this fellow stood up in public, congratulated his colleague, and drove to Kampala. When he arrived at Kampala, he was told he was the winner. He said, no, you see, I even considered that, listen to what we are telling you, you are the winner, you were elected. He said, okay. So it's as ridiculous as that. So, in that spirit, the Uganda People's Congress got more seats, and Paulo Mwanga, who at that time was Secretary General of Uganda People's Congress, and at the same time, the chairman of the Military Commission, made an announcement that it was only he, and not the military, not the Presidential Commission, and not the chairman of the Electoral Commission, and not the Secretary of the Electoral Commission, but he, the chairman of the Military Commission, was the only one who would make the announcements as the results of the election. And he announced that Uganda People's Congress, his party, had won the majority of seats. And therefore, its leader, President Obote, was the president. Now, there, people all believe, many believe, that UPC did not get the majority of seats. And that's where the controversy comes from. So it's as simple as that. So
that was the new era now for the current government.
And that's the beginning of, well, some of us who were in UPM had to run out of the place. They went to arrest President Museveni one evening. He had left. He had disappeared. Early in the morning on that day, they arrived at my home to arrest me. I had also left in the evening.
Arrest you?
Yeah, yes.
On what grounds?
Somebody, we are told, advised President Obote that he should not be worried about DP. They were not harmful. He should not be worried about Conservative Party. They would be of no problem to him. But the main problem he had was UPM, led by Museveni. And he was advised to arrest all the leaders of UPM immediately and keep them in Luzira prison. So they went to arrest Museveni, who had run away. They came to arrest me in the morning. I had also run away. They went to Bidandi study, and they found him there, kept him in prison for 3 years. They went to Mchala Kalema, and they were advised Mchala Kalema was harmless. He should be left aside. They went to Apolo Elisa Kironde. I think you saw a road called Kironde Road, the road down, somewhere there. He had one leg. He was our teacher, Budo. But he told them that was harmless, you know. They went to arrest a man called Mombo Muhwana, and they found him there, and they took him to Luzira. So those of us who ran away regrouped immediately in Nairobi. Museveni group was called the PRA, People's Resistance Army. We found Kaya's group already there, UFM, Uganda Freedom Movement. Lule already had his Uganda Freedom Fighters. Moses Ali had his, called the Rescue Front. And the four got together in January 1981 to form one group that would fight Obote and throw him out of here. The two succeeded in getting together, Lule's and Museveni's. The other two did not join us. So the combination of Lule's group with that of Museveni became the National Resistance Movement.
Okay.
And at that time it was led by two committees. A committee called the National Resistance Council, NRC, which was to be in Uganda under the chairmanship of Moses Chigongo, and the NRM External Committee, which was in Nairobi under the chairmanship of Chikaire. By the way, Chikaire is just down here in town in Kampala. So that Resistance Council, External NRM Council, committee is the one which met in my sitting room for weeks and weeks and weeks, We were only 9. Chairman Uchikaire, Secretary Sam Njuba, member Dr. Swamani Chigundu, member Professor Lule, member Bakulu Mpaji Wamala, member Professor Kanyerezi, member Ruhakana Rugunda, member Amama Mbabazi, and myself. Only 9 of us. It's sad to say that
so
out of the 9, we only the only 4
so
were
the
left.
story could be too long, sir, but we can stop it
But
at that.
but it's
So
the truth.
the kick-off,
People should
yes,
know.
the 1980 controversy now kicks off.
Now you should know.
Now let's come
who
to
was heading.
1986 now,
Yes.
the arrival of NRM from the bush.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you got to remember that when the war started, the chairman of the movement was Professor Lule. He died along the way, okay? And his vice became the chairman, President Museveni. So now the war came closer and closer until the ones who are fighting the resistance movement disagreed among themselves. I'm talking about Okero and Obote. When they disagreed, Okero threw out Obote. Okero now became the president. And for 6 months, the war, resistance war, did not stop. It continued to come until Okero found that he had no way of succeeding. He could not beat them off. So he took off too. And so in January, towards the end of January, the NRA arrived in Kampala, took over the government, saw in President Museveni as the president.
So that closes this chapter of Uganda's controversial leadership. Looks like the journey has been very, very controversial ever since 62 to date.
Precisely.
What really could have gone wrong? From your explanation, don't seem to have had a very peaceful transition of government.
Exactly.
From one person to another.
One simple reason. The Ugandans have failed to organize themselves into to make a proper constitution for themselves, which would guide them in their governing, in how to govern themselves. A constitution is like a rugorwente, it's like a fence, it's like a perimeter wall. It limits, you know, and it allows you inside to organize yourself. We have not had a chance to have a constitution which is proper. 1995 constitution included.
Okay.
The first one, the independence constitution, was thrown out by one man, Obote, and according to what I hear, I don't see any writing. He accused it of favoring the Baganda and pampering them. Okay? He replaced it with what they call the pigeonhole constitution, which lasted only 12 months. You know, the pigeonhole constitution was immediately replaced by the Republican constitution. The word republic itself is repugnant in some parts of Uganda. Republic means a country that is laid without kingdoms. That's the constitution which he which abolished the Buganda kingdom, the Toro kingdom, the Ankole kingdom, the Soga kingdom, and the Bunyoro kingdom. Hence, the word Republican. And it has become a kind of contagious thing. If you don't mention the word republic when you are mentioning the word Uganda, oh, you are seen as anti-Uganda. Yet, relativity comes in now. Yet in Buganda, the word republic, by those who understand what it means anti-Buganda, destruction of Buganda kingdom.
So 2 points more remaining, just 2. Let's also go at the regional level. We have the East African Community, EAC, and I'm told there was the first phase of EAC, it collapsed, then now we have a renewed EAC. But what I want to understand, Uganda's as a country and its relationship with East African Community, and how come that Kenya, Tanzania have one language? Apparently even Congo has, Burundi, but only Uganda remained with English. What was the controversy of the East African Community? And where are we now? And what's the way forward?
Remember that when the British came to this region, first of all, Tanzania was not a British territory. It belonged to Germany. But when Germany was defeated, the United Nations, the League of Nations, took Tanzania, then not known as Tanzania but as Tanganyika, and put it under the care of the British. Kenya was a colony, and the difference between a colony and a protectorate is that a colony is like an overseas province of Europe, of England, of United Kingdom. So the Bazungu who came there settled, and the land became theirs, and it was their home. Particularly, the veterans of the Second World War were given miles and square miles in Kenya, and they settled down and even forced the native Kikuyu people out of their land into camps. Now, the language, having started from Mombasa, is grows by nature, necessarily. They are trading and they are working, getting close to one another, and beginning to know Swahili as an easier language to use than Kikuyu, which would be understood by others. So it was supposed to come over. Now, the Bazungu being together, and their aim being to have a large territory which produces raw materials, crude oil, raw materials for their industries, and then providing a market for their manufactured goods. Wanted to put together the entire group, you know. The Ugandans here resisted. Why? They were resisting the idea of using Uganda's land as a land which now belongs to the colonialists as their extension from the United Kingdom. The Uganda could not agree to that. And I'm sure so many others also would not agree to that. So they resisted. Kurubia, then the Treasurer of Uganda, appeared in person in the House of Commons in 1931 and pleaded a case against including Uganda into the proposed East African Federation. So it was that. Now things are changing at the moment. Uganda having been misruled ever since independence. There are so many who are saying maybe we should join the East African community. Why? Because every war which has been here has been a war to force an incumbent president out of the chair. Forced Mutesa out, forced Obote out, forced Amin out, forced Obote again out. Now there is a Cold War, not announced, to force the president out. Having been president for 30 years and over, you know, and people are saying, it's these wars which are causing miseries to the Ugandans. How do we get to them, or how do we get rid of them? Or maybe we should join those ones who have been changing their leaders peacefully and without so much controversy. Have I answered your question?
Yes. Also, there are some documents that at one time it was being proposed that Luganda become the national language in Uganda and English the main official language. I don't know how much you can share with us. How did Uganda miss out?
Selfishness. Jealousy. Jealousy against Buganda is not new. The Englishmen who came here first included a reverend called John Roscoe, included another one called Dr. Lowe. Dr. Lowe wrote a book, The Mind of Buganda, and he said that almost all the communities around East Africa, all the tribes were jealous against Buganda. Your question should be why? Because before even independence, the British had a consular general who was stationed in Zanzibar. When he used to send a message to the king of Buganda, he would address it to His Majesty Kabaka Mutesa I, recognizing Buganda as an equal. And the rest of the communities around Buganda were not at that stage, so they became jealous. And that jealousy remains today. Today it's even worse, because when Buganda invited the Bazungu and gave them the facilities. You build a school here, build Budo here, build Kisubi here, build Masaka, Kitovu, Nsambia, Namilyango. The sort of Western enlightenment started here, and those who were enlightened then spread out to the other parts of Uganda, and that creates a natural kind of resentment and jealousy. It's like the resentment against the United States. You notice that half of the wealth of the world is in the USA, but only 6% of the population of the world is in USA. Isn't it natural that people would resent the United States and become jealous of it? That's exactly the same reason.
So that's how we lost out on Luganda and also Kiswahili.
Oh, yes. Kiswahili had a misfortune which is different. Almost everybody who have done horrors in Buganda here use the Kiswahili language. And Buganda know Kiswahili as being a language of the oppression and what shall I call it? Violence. Even its sound to Uganda sounds ridiculous. It's kind of orders. Pig upper. Chapa uyo. It's like it's not a gentleman's language like we would speak Rutoro or Runyankore or Uganda. So the Uganda hate it for that, you know, and not hate it but despise it. That a woman, a Muganda woman who speaks Swahili fluently is considered a kind of a harlot. You know, nobody respects that one. The point is this, that because of failure to have a good constitution properly negotiated, all these come out. What's wrong with having English as official language, Luganda as an official language, Swahili as an official language, and we use them all, and even any others. But because of jealousies, and the Bazungu took advantage of this, the Africans have disagreed on what to use, how to talk among themselves. Let's impose ours. So they taught us English. I understood us.
Are you favoring Kiswahili yourself as an individual, given the history of Uganda?
I don't really care. The languages grow by themselves. We now know English. Who actually forces you to know it?
So, Mr. Mayengo, let's conclude the debate now with the Kampala City Council, which you are very much popular with. Right now it's called Kampala Capital City Authority, but previously it was City Council. I don't know how much, what was the relationship with City Council. Talk to us about Kampala City Council 1962 to like Kampala Capital City Authority 2022 today.
It's like moving from the OAU to the African Union. They are the same. Much worse. Matters which are more interesting and more important is the assertion that Kampala is not in Buganda. Now that one is controversial. Definitely. Whether it's Kampala is called Kampala City Authority or Kampala City Council or Kampala City or whatever, it's immaterial. But the idea that Kampala is not in Buganda, each is Buganda. It's like saying London is not in England. And these are simple things which should not even matter much.
No, I'm asking this because I know very well that you have participated in the redevelopment and growth of Kampala. Initially as City Council and now as City Authority. For example, we have markets in the country which have remained very, very controversial. We have Owino Market, later on renamed Kiseka Market or something like that.
Doing exactly the same
and then St. Balikudembe. All these controversies have been coming up. Up to now, Kampala remains very, very controversial in administration. What has gone wrong as we celebrate Uganda's independence?
I think, again, it is a matter of jealousies and selfishness. I don't see anything else. I don't see, the name itself doesn't matter. But the markets, you know, simple things like markets becoming so controversial. For what? Why is it such a big deal to have the people who work in the market elect one of them to head the market and then elect another one to replace that one and go? You see, the same way of leading the country has now crept over to simple things like markets.
Okay.
forcefully forcing out whoever and forcing others to be the leaders. You know?
So it's
now
question of leadership. Thank you very much, sir. We don't have much time. Your name again and your final message that people listen to.
In the window market, I only go there about once every 5 years.
Yes.
Probably 10 years.
So your name and your final message should be
Israel
celebrating
Mayengo,
independence
Israel Mayengo, what should I say? A native of Sess Islands, but now currently in Kampala.
Should we celebrate independence?
There's no reason why we don't celebrate independence. It's our duty now to put together things and correct ourselves and put our house in order. I had some visitors. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you a happy celebration of Uganda's independence and hope that every next one will be a better one than this one.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Nze Haji Kaboggoza omusomi w'edduwa ntereeza ensonga z'amaka ebyenfuna n'endwadde ezitategeerekeka. Haji Kaboggoza omusomi w'edduwa nsiŋŋaanibwa Ekitigoma ku lw'Ejjinja. Bw'obanga otuuse Ekitigoma mu ttawuni ku siteegi osobola okuba ku nnamba z'essimu ezo z'olaba zitambula. Gwe wenna ali ewala oyinza okuyita ku mukutu gwaffe ogwa WhatsApp ku layini eyo eya MTN obudde bwonna mbeerako.